This is a reconstructed image of a young man who had no name. His identity, a mystery that police believed impossible to solve. That was, until 20 years later, when amateur internet sleuths on Reddit finally cracked the case. The young man's body was found on June 26, 1995, at a gruesome scene off of US Route 58 West. Tire tracks veering off the highway led to a smoking Vanagon smashed against a pair of large trees. Two dead young men were found partly ejected, hanging out of the windshield with their faces covered in lacerations. State Trooper Ted Jones arrived on the scene and searched their bodies for identification. The driver had ID Michael Hager, a 21-year-old student at the University of South Carolina. The other young man in the passenger seat, wearing a Grateful Dead t-shirt, had no identification and no belongings other than what was in his pockets: 4 quarters, a yellow Bic lighter, and 2 Grateful Dead ticket stubs. Depending on what source you read, a note was also found either in his pocket or in the vicinity that read, "Jason, sorry we had to go. See you around. Call me." It was signed by Carolyn T. and Carolyn O. There was a drawing on it, believed to be of Jerry Garcia, the lead vocalist and guitarist of the Grateful Dead band. And there was a number, but unfortunately, the number had no area code. The number on the note was called, probably using local area codes, but it led to a dead end. Michael's family was informed. They were distraught, but they had no idea who the man in the passenger seat was. So, Officer Ted Jones concluded that the young man was probably a hitchhiker. When the autopsy was done, there were no drugs in his or Michael's systems, which led Trooper Jones to believe that the driver fell asleep at the wheel. This lined up with how the tracks veered off of the highway so early before the crash. When the unidentified passenger's fingerprints were sent to the FBI database, no matches were found, and combining this with the fact that his face was covered in lacerations meant that identification would be very difficult. But they identified that he was between 15 and 21 years old, with brown eyes, long curly brown or dark blonde hair, dyed reddish. His teeth were well cared for, but there was no extensive dental work done, as he still had his wisdom teeth. Aside from the tie-dyed Grateful Dead t-shirt, he had on beaded and macrame necklaces, light blue Levi's jeans, and black Fila running shoes size 11.5. His left ear was pierced, but wasn't wearing an earring at the time. They found a scar on his back, a faded tattoo on his right arm, and a homemade star tattoo on his upper left arm. But with nothing else to go on, Ted Jones focused his attention on the 2 Grateful Dead ticket stubs, which were for shows on June 24th and June 25th, the 2 days before the car crash. Both Grateful Dead concerts took place at RFK Stadium, Washington, D.C., about 180 miles north of the crash site, as a part of what ended up being an important tour, as it was 2 months before the band's founder, Jerry Garcia, passed away. They traced who bought the tickets and found it was sold to a man from Pennsylvania who was very much alive and not named Jason. He was a scalper that had bought 20 tickets and resold them. But when State Trooper Ted Jones interviewed him, the Pennsylvania man couldn't recall who he had sold them to. It was yet another dead end. There were plenty of clues, but no identity found on the side of the road. So let's discover where this road leads us and bring him home.
What are you doing?
Just going over a case where a simple fatal car crash turned into a mystery that stumped investigators for decades. Who was this young man? Did he have a family? How long were they going to...
This story is both tragic and deeply unsettling. A young man, barely out of his teens, dies in a violent crash, and yet for decades, no one knows who he is. The details make it feel so personal. The Grateful Dead shirt, the note with the mysterious signatures, the ticket stubs. But none of it was enough to give him a name at the time. The idea that someone could die and be completely unaccounted for, with no immediate family stepping forward, is heartbreaking. It makes you wonder about his life before the crash, who he was, where he came from, and whether someone was out there looking for him. The investigation itself is frustrating to follow, with so many promising clues leading to dead ends. The note with a phone number that went nowhere. The ticket stubs that traced back to a scalper who couldn't remember the buyer. It's like a puzzle missing its final piece. You can feel the desperation of the officers trying to put a name to this young man, only to come up short. The fact that it took internet sleuths decades later to finally solve the case is a testament to the power of collective curiosity and determination. It also raises an unsettling thought. How many other nameless victims are out there? Their stories left unfinished. This case sticks with you because it isn't just about a mystery. It's about a person, a life that was almost lost to time. It's a reminder of how fragile identity can be and how easily someone can slip through the cracks, even in an age of records and databases. It makes you wonder, how many more stories like this are waiting to be uncovered?
Be left in the dark wondering what happened to their boy.
Here, let me take a look. Yeah. Oh. Aha! After carefully analyzing all the evidence, I've concluded that he was a fan of the Grateful Dead who just so happened to be the inspiration behind my heavy metal band, the Circuit Freaks.
Incorrect statements detected. Number 1, it is not your band. It is a collaboration between you, myself, and the Tardigrade. Number 2, the Grateful Dead is a band from the 60s that mixed rock, country, blues, jazz, and several other styles, none of which sound anything like heavy metal.
If you're such a musical expert, then why are your vocals always so off-pitch?
At least my rhythm is intact. Perhaps a drum machine would serve in your place. My cousin is available.
You can't kick me out of the band, because I quit!
Because of this apparent love for the Grateful Dead being one of the only things known about him at the time, the unidentified man, or John Doe as they are called, became known within web sleuth communities as the Grateful Doe. A clever pun, if I do say so myself. Since this Grateful Dead fan, or Deadheads as they refer to themselves, was a hitchhiker and bought tickets from a scalper for the 2 shows at RFK Stadium, one might theorize he was following the band on their tour, except he was heading south from the stadium. The next tour location was in Michigan, northwest of the stadium.
Huh. Well, where was he going then?
It's not clear. To visit someone? Maybe they were making a detour. Let's look into the driver, Michael, and see if he can give us any clues. He was with his fiancée in Fairfax County, Virginia, when he left her that morning around 7:45 a.m. After traveling south, he stopped at his father's house in Williamsburg, Virginia at noon. His father wasn't there, so Michael left a phone message saying that he was headed to visit his mother in Inman, South Carolina. But on the way there, he crashed on Highway 58. A neighbor of the father reported having seen a young man with Michael when he stopped at the house during the visit to Williamsburg. This would suggest that our Grateful Doe was picked up somewhere south of Fairfax, not too far from the Grateful Dead concert. It was believed they were both Deadheads, and likely shared a bond because of that, even though Michael hadn't attended the recent concerts. But according to the investigation from State Trooper Jones, Michael was alone when he visited his father's place.
That doesn't make sense. The neighbor said another man was with him.
Yes, that's what was reported in a Freelance Star article from 1996. But Jones claims that was incorrect. If that's right, it would mean Grateful Doe actually hitched a ride somewhere between Gloucester and Emporia, much further south.
Yep, not liking this Ted Jones guy. I mean, the Grateful Doe went to JFK Stadium for those concerts. Ain't that far from where Michael started?
Yes.
So wouldn't it make sense that that's about where they met up? Not way down south at the end of the trip?
Well, our Grateful Doe could have already hitchhiked further down when he met Michael. Regardless of where our Grateful Doe was picked up, the crash happened at around 1:30 p.m. that day, 90 minutes after Michael left his father's place.
Okay, so we got a whole timeline. Now what? Surveillance footage? DNA sequencing? Super enhanced reflections off of someone's eyeballs?
With cases like this, only so much can be done. At this point, with all the dead ends, Trooper Jones needed help from the public. They released all of this information, but couldn't release a photo due to the lacerations. Another problem was that some news reported him as a redhead, despite having only red-dyed hair. This lowered the chances of identifying him significantly, since there was no image of him released. To make matters even worse, coverage of the crash was only in the Virginia area, even though it was suspected he might be from out of state.
And let me guess, nobody came forward.
Exactly.
Seriously? This whole thing feels like a bunch of fumbles. Not even a sketch or nothing?
A forensic sketch was only released 7 months after the crash, at which time news did report it again.
7 months? Why?
This part of the story really highlights the frustrating inconsistencies in the investigation. The conflicting reports about whether Grateful Doe was with Michael at his father's house create a huge point of confusion. If the neighbor really saw him there, but Trooper Jones claimed Michael was alone, then either the neighbor was mistaken or the official report missed something. That kind of contradiction can completely derail a case, especially one as dependent on small details as this. The fact that no clear photo of Grateful Doe was released early on due to the injuries is understandable, but it definitely hurt the chances of identifying him. The redhead mistake made things even worse. If someone was looking for a missing friend or relative with brown or dark hair, they wouldn't even think to check. Add in the limited media coverage being mostly in Virginia, even though he was possibly from another state. And it's no surprise nobody came forward. It's like every possible misstep happened to make sure he stayed unidentified for as long as possible. The humor in the dialogue, like joking about super enhanced reflections off someone's eyeballs, keeps the tone from getting too heavy, but it also points out a real issue. Back then, they didn't have the advanced forensic tools we rely on today. If this case happened now, with things like social media and better DNA testing, he might have been identified much sooner. It makes you wonder how many other unidentified people from past decades are just waiting for modern technology to finally reveal their names.
So long.
It's not clear why.
And it was only reported in Virginia, right?
Yup.
Jeez, Ted Jones wasn't doing nothing.
While there may be some fumbles, he was trying. Trooper Jones sent the description to all the police agencies in the country and received missing persons reports from 15 of them. He also sent the fingerprints to the Secret Service, which had a larger database than the FBI. The case information and sketch were mailed by him to news organizations in hopes of more coverage. But despite the hard work of Jones, nothing came out of those efforts. Jones said in an interview, "I investigated everything from every angle, and nothing ever panned out."
Okay, maybe I'm being a bit hard on him, but I still feel like there could have been more done here.
Well, from Jones' perspective, all he could do now was pass the investigation over to the State Medical Examiner's office in Richmond, Virginia, to compare the young man to missing case reports. And so, that's when the case went cold, and the Grateful Doe, whose first name may or may not have been Jason, would go unidentified for years to come. While the case files and evidence gathered dust in storage, the internet started to become a staple in homes around the world, connecting people like never before. It was a new era, with unknown possibilities and noisy modems. In 1999, the true crime community website, Web Sleuths, and a missing persons website, the Doe Network, were launched. But it wouldn't be until the mid-2000s, nearly 10 years after the crash, when this case found a home on the internet. In 2004, a profile page for the Grateful Doe was created on the Doe Network. And in 2005, user Trying2ID posted about it on Web Sleuths, asking for help. People who were moved by the story investigated and scrutinized all the details from the comfort of their homes.
Sounds like your kind of people, bro.
They absolutely are. Theories ran rampant. Some questioned if the note was his and if it actually said Jason on it. They also speculated that he may have been a runaway. Others wondered if his stuff might have been stolen.
Which would explain why he didn't have any ID on him.
User Trying2ID took charge of the investigation, a vigilante detective if you would. They also showed frustration with law enforcement, saying, "He died over 10 years ago. They do not have time to help this young man, so why not release information to me? Someone that is willing to give any extra time I have to this young man."
Yeah, like if they had the phone number instead of that blurred out image, a bunch of people could have called tons of area codes.
Well, it's likely for privacy reasons. Also, one might assume law enforcement can't just release evidence to any citizen that asks for it.
An exception could have been made, though. I mean, the police couldn't solve this case, but maybe these people could.
Well, they weren't the only ones to show frustration with law enforcement. A few pointed out some things that Trooper Jones could have done. One user suggested he should have gone to the next show and handed out flyers. But the sketch only came about 7 months later. Other users helped Trying2ID. Many took it upon themselves to compare the sketch and descriptions to missing person reports. When they found similarities, they posted their findings on Web Sleuths, and Trying2ID contacted the medical examiner in Virginia. But every time they thought they had a match, fingerprints proved otherwise. But one promising theory appeared. There's a group called the Wharf Rats.
Hey, that's a pretty cool band name.
They weren't a band, but a support group, like AA. At the time, it was spawned from the Deadhead culture. They would go to concerts and hold sessions in between sets to help members lead a drug and alcohol-free lifestyle.
Oh, okay, that's cool. What's the theory? Grateful Doe was one of them?
I'm not sure, but the most prominent founder of the group, the one they called Mom, her name was Carolyn Thomas.
Caroline T.
This case is a mix of frustrating dead ends, possible mistakes, and a glimpse into how online communities can sometimes outshine law enforcement in persistence. Ted Jones's efforts are a double-edged sword. On one hand, he did put in the work by sending fingerprints to the Secret Service, distributing information nationwide, and trying to get the media involved. On the other, the 7-month delay before releasing the forensic sketch and the limited media coverage outside Virginia were huge mistakes. Misreporting him as a redhead also likely hurt identification chances. The rise of web sleuths and the Doe network in the 2000s really shows how the internet changed investigations. Users like Trying2ID acted like citizen detectives, questioning details and doing their own comparisons. Their frustration is understandable. The police couldn't solve it, but they also held back key information that might have helped the community. The Wharf Rats connection is an interesting lead. If the note did reference Carolyn Thomas, he could have been part of the group, which might explain why he didn't have ID or was traveling randomly. The theory about stolen belongings makes sense too. If someone robbed him before he hitched a ride, that could explain why his identity was a mystery. Some users pointed out that Trooper Jones should have gone to the next Grateful Dead show and handed out flyers.
From that note.
It did sound promising, and a few of the web sleuths pointed it out. So Trying2ID called her, and unfortunately, she said she wasn't the Carolyn T from the note.
But Caroline T. Caroline Thomas. She's at all the concerts.
She gave no reasoning, but the web sleuths believed she had no reason to lie. There's lots of Carolyn T's out there after all.
Ugh, these theories are going nowhere. Not a single break, nothing.
For now. Luckily, these web sleuths were very persistent. Carolyn Thomas did agree to hand out the information to all the deadheads she knew at the time. At least that's something.
Did any of them recognize him?
Well, not necessarily. But getting the word out was important, and maybe they knew somebody that knew somebody.
Come on, this thing is pointless. Ugh.
You seem angrier than usual.
This meatbag demanded authorship credit on our new song, Neon Storms. Yet there was zero contribution by said meatbag.
I got a drum solo in it, and I'm the face of the band. Cause I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm the only one of us with the face.
Excessive diva personality traits detected, advising you to get over it.
Right. Well, despite the efforts of these at-home detectives, years would pass, and hope would fade. But there wasn't anything stopping these communities from trying to solve this case. In 2012, it got another push, this time from the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They posted a new computer-generated image of the Grateful Doe on their website, using the autopsy photos as a reference. The recreation was more clear and realistic, but people were quick to note that it looked different from the original sketch. They believed that the trauma to his face attributed to this discrepancy. Regardless of this, users spread the new image around, hoping someone might recognize him. That same year, a Facebook page was set up by users Alyssa and Leisha. Like on Web Sleuths, the members put their detective hats on and looked into missing persons reports. But with all the dead ends they faced, more theories ran wild. Some thought that he could have been an abducted child, a foster kid, or someone stole his identity while his family went on believing he was alive. That's why these two communities spent years looking for Grateful Doe's identity, driven by emotions, thinking, what if this had been their child? But despite all the effort, it was hard to hold on to hope. They needed a break in the case, or perhaps they needed to break the internet. And that's exactly what happened on New Year's Eve 2014, nearly 20 years since the crash. In an attempt to get more eyes on the Grateful Doe, a user by the name of Grey Metal put together a collage of all reconstructed images and some of the evidence, then posted it on Imager. She wrote a heartfelt first-person post laying out all of the details. Do you recognize me? I have been without my name for nearly 20 years. In June of 1995, I was involved in a fatal car accident in Emporia, Virginia. The driver fell asleep at the wheel. He had his ID on him, but I didn't, and his family do not know who I am. For 20 years, no one has come forward to identify me. I have adopted the identity of the Grateful Doe. Maybe we went to school together, lived next door to one another, or maybe you saw me around town. Maybe you know of a missing person who fits my identity. Can you help me finish my journey? Immediately, it went viral and made the first page of Imager. which then prompted the creation of a subreddit to help spread the word even more.
This is a wild roller coaster of persistence, frustration, and hope. It's fascinating how much these online communities dug into this case. You've got to give credit to people like Trying to ID, who took matters into their own hands and refused to give up. But even with all the effort, it's crazy how Carolyn Thomas didn't give them the straight answer, especially considering the connection they were trying to make with her. The breakthrough coming in 2012 with the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was a huge moment. The new computer-generated image was a step forward, but again, it wasn't the definitive answer. Everyone had so many theories. Was he a runaway, an abducted child, or someone whose identity was stolen? It's so hard to hold on to hope when every lead turns into a dead end. But then the New Year's Eve post in 2014 on Imgur was a game changer. Gray Metal's post went viral and brought the case back into the spotlight. That level of emotional appeal, where the person claimed they had been living as Grateful Doe for nearly 20 years. It just hits you. It felt personal, real, and really made people pay attention. All that passion and energy from online communities finally started paying off.
As a result, 2,000 people joined the Facebook group in a matter of days, tripling their numbers. Around that time, Gray Metal joined up with web sleuthers, and as commenters started to pour in, she reported her findings to them and asked for their help. That one Imager post sparked a fire like no other attempt before it, and now 4 big internet communities, Imager, Reddit, Facebook, and web sleuths, were working hard to crack the case and get more eyes on it.
Yeah, there we go. Getting some momentum.
Exactly. The Imager post was exactly what this investigation needed. Leads started to pour in. A woman on Craigslist claimed to know the mother of a missing person named Jason, but that Jason turned out to be alive. Meanwhile, 3 other people said the sketches reminded them of a Jason, or a Jay, who was a Grateful Dead fan. The first lead was on Facebook. Someone claimed to have known a Jason they hung out with in a summer a year or 2 before the crash in Myrtle Beach. He worked at a shop that sold a lot of Grateful Dead merchandise, but they didn't have more information than that, like a family or other friends. The second lead was on web sleuths. One of the new users came forward to reveal they knew a Jay on tour with the Grateful Dead during the summer of 1995. He was very friendly, even if he was known to interrupt a lot. He stayed at people's homes and got lifts from friends to the other Grateful Dead shows. This Jason had a wallet and a backpack. But again, the second lead didn't provide too much information. But luckily, the third lead, which came from Reddit, was the most promising. A man came forward claiming that he and his 2 friends were roommates with Jason in 1994 and 1995. They described him as a laid-back surfer dude from Myrtle Beach and a major deadhead, always talking about the band. He was 17 to 18 years old and worked at a McDonald's. He left in early 1995, and they lost contact with him. Despite all these promising leads, the problem was none of them remembered his last name after 20 years.
But if this was our guy, then we would know that he went by Jay and he was from Myrtle Beach. That ain't nothing.
Exactly. Every piece of information is helpful, and the search was picking up steam, and with it, a new theory emerged. He was likely following the Grateful Dead tour, but when he somehow lost his wallet and backpack, be it stolen or forgotten somewhere, he decided to return home to Myrtle Beach, if that was indeed home. Michael, the driver, would have been able to bring Jay part of the way there, as Michael was heading to Inman, South Carolina, only a 4-hour drive from Myrtle Beach. With these leads, the icing on the case was another one of the roommates submitted some photographs. The Jason from these photos had quiet eyes, half shut most of the time, with a bright smile on his face that captured people's hearts. He especially looked like the original police sketches. But they've been down this road before, with plenty of missing persons that match the sketches. This may not be the Jason they were looking for. The world is a big place.
But this is definitely a good lead, no?
Absolutely, and the communities believed they were so close to cracking the case. They wanted to know if this Jason was alive and well, so they spread the new photos online, and it turned even more viral. Gray Metal, along with Leisha and Alyssa, who ran the Facebook group, worked with the other users to follow up on these 3 leads and get the word out to Myrtle Beach. Plus, news outlets started to pick it up again. A few days later, a man came across this viral missing person on Facebook and recognized the photos immediately. In shock, he called his mother, Margaretta Evans, and then she posted this in the Facebook group. "Oh my God, this is my son, Jason Callahan from Myrtle Beach. I've been looking for him all this time with no luck. Today my other son saw this Facebook page, and after all the years of praying for him to just call me or come home, please inbox a message or phone number to contact me.
Holy mother mackerel. Did we just find his family?
Well, we confirmed that this Jason Callahan was missing, but not dead. Likely the photos from the roommate was of this Jason. However, was this also the same person as the body found? You can never be completely sure until there's something more concrete, like fingerprints or DNA. You don't want to give a family false hope.
Man, imagine not knowing where your son is for like 20 years.
It's hard to. Leisha, one of the Facebook group moderators, wanted to approach this carefully though. So first, she reached out and used a lawyer to confirm that this woman was in fact the mother of a Jason Callahan. Next, they would need to do a DNA test, and that could take months. But there was a lingering question on everybody's minds. If the Grateful Doe was Jason Callahan, why had he gone unidentified for so long? Eventually, it was revealed, to everyone's surprise, that the mother never submitted a missing persons report for him.
The hell? Why?
At this moment, it was unclear, but to get the DNA testing done, Margareta had to officially file that report first. She described him as having wavy blonde hair and brown eyes, 5'10" to 6 feet in height, and about 160 pounds. He was 19 at the time he went missing, but strangely, she described him as having no marks or known tattoos.
Oh, but a guy totally had tattoos.
Correct, but it is possible that he could have gotten them after he left home. Also, it had been 20 years. Memories tend to get fuzzy. The mother then submitted a sample of her DNA. After the communities waited on pins and needles for months, the test finally came back.
And?
It was inconclusive.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
The problem was that the DNA given by either parent is random. Your DNA is usually comprised of half from your mother and half from your father, but Jason's father unfortunately passed in 2009, never knowing what happened to his son. It's for this reason that acquiring samples from multiple family members of both parents is useful in missing persons cases. So this time, from his father's side, 2 half-sisters, a half-brother, and a cousin submitted samples as well. On December 9th, 2015, almost a year after Gray Metal's post on Imager, and over 20 years after the crash, a post was submitted on the Facebook group. It read, "Update! The news we have been waiting for. The DNA results are back that our Grateful Doe is in fact Jason Callahan, missing since 1995. I've been sitting here for how long in shock for both the sadness of his family and the fact that here on Facebook, we are making a difference. Because of everyone here, this man will finally make his way home. Leisha and Alyssa." It continued, "On another note, I want this story to do so much more. I really pray that this story gives an important lesson to reporting your missing loved ones or even trying to check up on them if you haven't had contact in years." With it was a picture of Jason, reading, "Rest in peace, Jason Callahan."
Finally. But so, why didn't his mother ever report him missing? All those people looking up missing person reports. No wonder they never found him. It was useless.
That was the lingering question. The internet was divided. She was actually receiving a lot of hate online for that.
What? I get it, she didn't do things the right way, but leave her alone. She's a grieving mother.
But luckily, many also showed support for her, especially on the Facebook group. It turns out, the problem was that Margareta didn't know which jurisdiction to file the report in since her son was following the Grateful Dead around the country. Jason's half-sister, Shannon Mickelson, said no one ever thought to really file a report because everyone assumed he wanted to be missing. His mother hoped he was living his life, married and happy.
And this news must have been especially devastating.
Likely, yes, but it did give them closure. And even if she wanted to file a report, users on web sleuths were quick to point out that police often don't take missing persons seriously. One user who ran away said, when her mother called the police, they explained that she was 16 and old enough to do as she pleased. Another user stated, "I get very angry when people assume that it is easy to go to the police and that they will automatically agree to take the report." Meanwhile, a user who worked in healthcare said that many parents had sons or daughters who were young adults and enjoyed a wandering lifestyle who they had just lost contact with. The sons or daughters weren't assumed to be missing or dead. Jason's half-sister, Shannon, went on to show her gratitude. "I'm so incredibly grateful for all the people who kept searching for his identity. The compassion they have to search for years and years for his identity is something that can't be measured. This is not how I expected to find my brother, yet knowing so many people cared gives me some sort of peace." Meanwhile, Trisha Griffith, the owner of Web Sleuths, said in a Huffington Post article about Jason Callahan that she hoped now law enforcement would start to look at the site as a legitimate resource. In the United States alone, about 600,000 missing people and 4,400 unidentified bodies are reported every year. Luckily, many of the people are found and bodies end up identified, but thousands of cases go cold. The Facebook group and subreddit for Jason Callahan is now dedicated to helping find unidentified persons in general. This just goes to show that the internet doesn't have to be just for TikTok dances and hateful comments. Sometimes, communities can come together for the grateful good.
Ignoring the lame pun, you're right. It's great when people and appliances come together. What do you say, Howard? Give it another try?
Your drum rhythm is above average. I will allow you to rejoin the trio.
Great. Let's go finish our practice. Hit it!
The investigation, fueled by a collective online effort, had made significant progress. Within days of Grey Metal's Imgur post, 2,000 people joined the Facebook group, tripling its numbers. As the influx of online activity grew, Grey Metal teamed up with web sleuthers, seeking their help in analyzing the clues. The investigation had reached a new level of momentum, with 4 major online communities, Imgur, Reddit, Facebook, and web sleuths, working together to unravel the mystery. Leads began to emerge, each one adding a piece to the puzzle. One woman on Craigslist claimed to know a missing person named Jason, though it was later discovered that this Jason was alive. Meanwhile, 3 others came forward, suggesting that the sketches of the unknown man resembled someone named Jason or Jay, a fan of the Grateful Dead. The first lead came from Facebook, where someone claimed to know a Jason from Myrtle Beach, who had worked at a store selling Grateful Dead merchandise, but had little information beyond that. The second lead emerged on Web Sleuths, where another user spoke about a Jay who had been a friendly, though somewhat interruptive person on tour with the Grateful Dead in 1995. This lead also offered little more than a description of his lifestyle, staying at people's homes and hitching rides to other concerts. However, the third lead from Reddit proved to be the most promising. A man shared that he and his friends had been roommates with Jason in 1994 and 1995, describing him as a laid-back surfer from Myrtle Beach and a big fan of the Grateful Dead. He was around 17 or 18 years old, worked at a McDonald's, and had left in early 1995. Yet, like the other leads, they couldn't recall his last name after 20 years. But the fact that he was known as Jay and had connections to Myrtle Beach was valuable. Despite the lack of a last name, these new leads pointed to a plausible theory. Jason had been following the Grateful Dead tour, but may have lost his wallet and backpack, possibly getting them stolen or misplacing them. If that were the case, he could have returned home to Myrtle Beach, and Michael, the driver, might have been able to help him get part of the way there, since Michael was heading to Inman, South Carolina, just 4 hours away. The investigation gained further traction when a former roommate submitted photographs of Jason, showing a young man with a bright smile and half-shut eyes, a look that seemed to match the police sketches. However, despite the promising nature of this lead, investigators were cautious, knowing that many missing persons resembled the sketches, but were not necessarily the person they were looking for. The online community felt they were close to cracking the case, and the search for the truth intensified. They spread the new photos online, which went viral once again, attracting the attention of more people. As the investigation reached new heights, news outlets also began picking up the story. Several days later, a man saw the viral post on Facebook and recognized the photos of the missing person immediately. In shock, he contacted his mother, Margarita Evans, who then posted in the Facebook group claiming that the missing man in the photos was her son, Jason Callahan, from Myrtle Beach. She had been searching for him for years, and after seeing the post, she shared the message with the community, desperately hoping to reconnect with her son. Although they had found the family, doubts remained about whether this was indeed the same person found deceased in the crash. The family's claim was promising, but definitive confirmation was needed, which could only come from a DNA test or other concrete evidence. As the investigation continued, the question lingered: why had Jason been missing for so long without being identified? Why had his mother never filed a missing person report? Although they had found the family, doubts remained about whether this was indeed the same person found deceased in the crash. The family's claim was promising, but definitive confirmation was needed, which could only come from a DNA test or other concrete evidence. As the investigation continued, the question lingered: why had Jason been missing for so long without being identified? Why had his mother never filed a missing person report? The story took a turn when it was revealed that Margarita had never submitted a missing persons report because she wasn't sure which jurisdiction jurisdiction to file it in, given that Jason had been traveling with the Grateful Dead. It was also mentioned that everyone had assumed he wanted to be missing, with his mother hoping that he was living his life somewhere, married and happy. This revelation added complexity to the case, and it highlighted the difficulties families face when a loved one disappears without a trace. To proceed with the investigation, the next step was to have Margarita file an official missing person report, a process that took time. Once this was done, DNA samples were submitted for testing, though the results were not immediate. When they finally came back, the news was bittersweet, inconclusive. The DNA match could not be confirmed as Jason's due to the absence of his father's DNA, who had passed away years earlier. Despite this setback, more family members came forward to submit their DNA samples, including Jason's half-sisters, half-brother, and cousin. The waiting game continued, with the online communities, who had invested so much time and energy into the search, remaining hopeful. Finally, on December 9th, 2015, nearly a year after the initial Imgur post, the test results came back with a breakthrough. The deceased was, indeed, Jason Callahan. While the revelation brought closure to the mystery, it also raised new questions. Why hadn't Jason's mother reported him missing all those years ago? The internet was divided, with many people criticizing Margarita for her lack of action, while others showed empathy for the grieving mother. It was later revealed that the reason Margarita hadn't filed a report was because she had never thought Jason was missing. She had believed he was living a wandering lifestyle, perhaps enjoying his life on the road. Shannon Mickelson, Jason's half-sister, explained that no one had considered filing a report because they all assumed Jason was simply living his life as he pleased. Despite the pain and confusion that surrounded Jason's disappearance, the discovery of his identity brought closure for his family. They were grateful for the dedicated efforts of the online communities, who had tirelessly worked to uncover the truth. Jason's half-sister expressed her gratitude for the compassion shown by those who had been searching for him, saying that knowing so many people cared gave her peace. In the aftermath of the investigation, Trisha Griffith, the owner of WebSluths, spoke out in support of the importance of such online communities in solving cases like Jason's. She hoped that law enforcement would start viewing these platforms as legitimate resources for solving missing persons cases. The case of Jason Callahan serves as a powerful reminder that the internet can be more than just a space for memes and viral challenges. It can also be a place where people come together for a greater good.